over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so has been a pretty significant weakness on this roster. And now you could argue it's a strength with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. And if Quez Watkins can continue to improve, then they might have something there. And of course, Dallas Goddard is arguably a top 5 receiver. So they might actually have something there. You put those guys with arguably the best offensive line in the NFL, and this offense is set up. I mean, Jalen Hurts has an opportunity to really do something with this offense that's supporting him. So we'll see how that goes. But he's a major difference maker. If you have an opportunity to get a guy like him, go do it.
Along with John McMullen, I'm Jody McDonald. That makes us Mac Bird 365 guys. We got another Eagle expert to fall in with us. He probably takes his phillyvoice.com standard as the most important thing he does. I do, the fact that he's a member of the Marlton Mafia. And oh, by the way, it kind of pushes me to the third most knowledgeable football guy here in town. Baldinger lives here. Kempski lives here. I live here. Damn, I'll just keep falling down that list.
Damowich lives here too.
Yeah, Damo lives in Marlton.
And Damo did girls basketball before I did girls basketball. Yeah. How did I forget him? I followed in his footsteps all over the place.
I'm going to go Randy Brown too, since he coaches.
That's right. Former mayor of Marlton, Randy Brown.
Randy should have stuck to football. No, but we kid because we care. Jimmy Kempski, good to see you, buddy. How's your off season going?
It's the draft is over. So, and today, of course, is the schedule release. Yeah. But once you get past today, it's kind of a big gap between, well, we actually, I guess we have OTAs.
We still have OTAs for what they're going to do, Jimmy.
But from now until the end of July, when training camp begins, this is the best time of year for. I'm kidding, of course. But no, this is when we sort of get our lull in the action and can actually enjoy our lives for a little while.
Yeah, breather. But only a little bit of a breather. So right. You mentioned you're not going to be around for OTAs. Are the Eagles going to be around? They're not really doing anything. They're going to be out there. But is that I thought it was interesting. We go back a couple weeks. It was one of the draft press conferences. I think it was Zach Berman who asked them about the off-season work and the scale back and how he kind of shuttled it off to Nick Sirianni. And I was kind of shaking my head, and I've yet to meet the football coach. I always say, Jimmy, that doesn't want to practice. I don't think Nick is that guy.
Right.
You think it's a big deal? The Eagles have this sort of scale back and off-season work and really into training camp and the shorter practices and all that kind of stuff.
So what they're going to highlight is the fact that they had a very lucky season last year in terms of injuries. I mean, we've seen this team just get wrecked by injuries in, over the last half decade plus. I mean, they've had seasons destroyed because of major injuries along their offensive line. Notably also in their secondary at cornerback, safety as well. And last year, I mean, they had some offensive line injuries, but for the most part, they were a very healthy team, at least relative to other seasons. And that was part of the reasoning for them scaling back, their training camp practices and almost not playing their starters at all in the preseason. I mean, not just in the last 2 games or anything.
Jalen Hurts was entrenched. When we're all talking this shit, he was entrenched.
He didn't take a snap in the preseason at all last year, right? Yeah. No. So they placed a heavy emphasis on trying to do whatever they can to having all their players available week 1. So in that respect, it worked. They actually won pretty convincingly week 1 last year. I mean, they were the most penalized team in the NFL early in the season last year. So maybe that's an argument against sort of not, kind of going a little harder during training camp and the preseason. But yeah, it's an interesting debate to go either way. I agree with you. Certainly no head coach is going to be like, yeah, okay, let's just stay healthy. Let's just make sure we're healthy for week 1 and not maybe practice as hard as we should. But I do see merit to both sides of the argument.
Speaking of most penalized team in the NFL, leads me right into my first question. Derek Barnett, back for the Philadelphia Eagles. You are the king of the compensatory draft pick follow and understand and explain it better than anybody else I know. would the Eagles have been better just letting Derek Barnett walk out the door? Would have put him in better compensatory draft pick status, would it not have?
So if he had walked in free agency and signed with another team and was and qualified for the comp pick formula, they still wouldn't have more players lost in free agency than gained. So they still wouldn't have gotten a compensatory pick if he left. Unfortunately for them, otherwise they might have let him go. But yeah, I mean, but as far as bringing him back, I certainly wasn't a fan of that move. In fact, every year at the end of the season, I do a quote unquote stay or go series. Sure. I look at each positional group, and he was bottom 5 on the roster in terms of the fan voting in that series. So I also give the readers an opportunity to vote whether they want players to stay or go. He was at like 5% stay. So like it was almost like 95% wanted him to go. Leave the Eagles this offseason. They bring him back. They pay him like $5-6 million or something like that. I think the injury to David Ojabo during his pro day, he tore his Achilles. I think that may have had a lot to them bringing Barnett back, because I don't think they felt confident that one of the top tier edge rushers would make it to them at pick 15 or whatever. So they just wanted to make sure that they had somebody in place at edge rusher that they could, they at least with him, they have some familiarity with him. But yeah, ultimately, not as you mentioned, he had an absurd number of penalties last year, only had 2 sacks. So he actually did more harm than good, in my opinion, last year. They still view him as a like legitimate starting level defensive end in the NFL. But yeah, I certainly do not agree with them bringing him back, or Fletcher Cox at $14 million for that matter.
Now, okay, they weren't able to get that edge rusher, as you mentioned, Jimmy, and I agree with you. I think David Ojabo had a lot to do with it. They were able to trade up to get the big defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Now there's a 55% chance he would have been there, and you're probably the only one who's going to get that joke. So I appreciate you doing that piece. When you look at the Eagles' moves in the first round as a whole, and sort of the trying to seize the moment to get difference makers versus volume of the draft, and going from 10 picks to 5 picks and not being able to get that day 3 running back, not being able to get a corner, not being able to safety. Right. How do you kind of weigh that decision making?
So on day 1, I think they got 2 legit difference makers in Jordan Davis and in A.J. Brown. I mean, my instant analysis for the trade for A.J. Brown was, holy crap, they got A.J. Brown. Like you take a wide receiver position that has always been, or not always, but over the last, 10 years or so, has been a pretty significant weakness on this roster. And now you could argue it's a strength with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. And if Quez Watkins can continue to improve, then they might have something there. And of course, Dallas Goddard is arguably a top 5 receiver. So they might actually have something there. You put those guys with arguably the best offensive line in the NFL, and this offense is set up. I mean, Jalen Hurts has an opportunity to really do something with this offense that's supporting him. So we'll see how that goes. But he's a major difference maker. If you have an opportunity to get a guy like him, go do it. As far as the trade up for Jordan Davis, they give up, what was it, a 4th round pick and a couple 5s to move from, and it's a modest move up. I mean, they didn't go far. They only went from 15 to 13. But when you look at the players that got taken at 15 through the rest of the first round, I think there was a pretty substantial drop off from, and this is assuming Jordan Davis and Kyle Hamilton go in, whatever order you prefer at picks 13 and 14. And I look back at the 2014 draft when they had identified 6 players that they were really interested in that first round. And the last 2 of those players that were still available. The Eagles were picking 22. And when the Cardinals were on the clock at pick 20, there were 2 players left that the Eagles really were targeting, Brandon Cooks and HaHa Clinton-Dix. And the Eagles had an opportunity to trade up with the Cardinals to pick number 20 to make sure that they got one of those guys. And it almost certainly would have been Brandon Cooks. They did not. They didn't think the Cardinals were going to take a wide receiver or safety. And they got a little cute and they thought, okay, well, we'll just sit here and we'll get one of those guys. And then boom, Saints trade up. They take Cooks. The Packers at 21 take Clinton Dix. The Eagles are stuck at 22 with nothing. They make a little trade back and they yada, yada, yada. They end up with Marcus Smith. So in my opinion, that was a lesson learned for them in this draft, in that if they didn't get up to 13 to go get Jordan Davis, then they could be sitting there ultimately at 15, kind of holding nothing. So like, I think the aggressive move here was warranted because I do think there was a drop off. Was it a tough price to pay? Yeah. I mean, you don't want to give up 3 picks to move up 2 spots, of course. But when you have a guy like Jordan Davis, who his floor is premium run stopping defensive tackle. That's
which they didn't have, by the way. They did not have.
So now you get that guy, you can allocate more resources to the back end you have more guys in coverage theoretically. And then his ceiling is he's the most athletic defensive tackle ever, essentially, for a guy that's 6'6", 340, can run a 4.78, which is insanity. So he's got a high ceiling, to be determined if he can put up sack numbers in the NFL, but the potential is certainly there.
Howie Roseman might have been ahead of the game back in that year you were referencing, because according to the ESPN draft simulator, anytime you trade up, you're a loser. Yeah. So that's why Howie didn't trade up. And oh, by the way, I want to kind of question Nick Sirianni. How did he miss out on the opportunity to not sing the praises of A.J. Brown like Pete Carroll did in Seattle? Drew Lock would have been the #1 quarterback drafted had he been in this year's class. Oh, okay, Coach Pete. Yeah, right. A.J. Brown would have been the #1 wide receiver in this draft, and that's actually saying something with as many wide receivers who went, unlike the quarterback position this year. A.J. Brown's addition. Dallas Goddard kind of talked about it with you guys yesterday. Targets. He's not worried about his targets. He thinks his targets are going to be fine. He thinks they're just going to throw the ball more in general, which would be fine for his targets. And he said the same for Devontae Smith. Don't think Devontae's sweating his targets. They gave up what they gave up, and they're paying A.J. Brown what they're paying him. Oh, he's going to get the football. How much more are the Eagles going to throw the football this year? We all know it's some.
Yeah.
How big an increase is it going to be, Jimmy K?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really commit to the run game last year until week 7-ish, somewhere around there, or the Raiders game on the road, and they got behind early in that game and they sort of abandoned it. But that was the week where they sort of knew, okay, we got to abandon this pass heavy offense and sort of play to our strengths. And then they became the most run heavy team in the NFL from that point on by a long shot. By the end of the year, they were the most run heavy team in the NFL, even with the first 6-7 weeks of the season or whatever, where they passed the ball a lot. And that was when they were at their best, was when they were running the ball a lot. I don't think they feel as a franchise, though, that that's a formula for winning a Super Bowl, is to be as run heavy as they were last year. And I think they do want to throw the ball more. It's just a matter of how much is Jalen Hurts going to improve, A, from an accuracy standpoint, and then B, in terms of, reading the defense and trusting what he sees and getting the ball out a lot more quickly than he has in his first 1+ year as a starter for the Eagles. So, as far as what A.J. Brown is going to bring to the table here in terms of the targets that he's going to get, I would assume that certainly he, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goddard, those 3 guys are going to get the lion's share of the targets. And then if Quez Watkins can sort of stretch the field, if you can get the ball deep to him a few times, at least make defenses respect it, then the short to intermediate areas of the field are going to be wide open for those guys to make plays. And A.J. Brown and Dallas Goddard, for that matter, are excellent after the catch once they get the ball in their hands. And that was sort of an element that the Eagles were missing, at least from their wide receivers. Devontae Smith, very smooth route runner, can get open, can get separation, good hands. He's going to make the plays that come to him. Quez Watkins, speed guy, of course. He's actually got a little bit of run after the catch juice, but neither of those guys are big tackle breakers. So now you got a guy in A.J. Brown that defensive backs fear, that defensive backs often can't get on the ground. And you have a guy like Dallas Goddard who runs hard after the catch, and they're going to bring a toughness and physicality element to their receiving corps that I think they previously lacked.
Shifting sides of the ball, I think the most interesting part of yesterday's player availability was Hassan Reddick. And before I get to that, Jimmy, I think it was you, correct me if I'm wrong, you asked Nick, are you going to be a 4-3 team or 3-4 team? He said, I'll never answer that question teams want to know. Yeah, teams really are really concerned. We're not going to know that until September.
Yeah, right.
Or you're not going to line up on defense in training camp. But I digress. Hassan did bring up something interesting, and I'm surprised because he was paying the company line, and he'll say, "You'll see how I'm used on week 1, blah, blah, blah." And then I asked him, what's your day like? Are you working with Tracy Rocker? Are you working with Nick Rallis? How is this shaping up for you? And he said, no, I'm in a room with Coach Wash, Jeremiah Washburn.
Yeah.
And they have shifted their coaching of sort of the defensive line, the interior defensive line, Tracy Rocker, the defensive end outside linebackers, Jeremiah Washburn, and obviously the inside linebackers, Nick Rallis. Does that tell you anything on what's going on here?
Yeah, it's interesting that they've sort of carved out a new coaching position. By the way, my apologies if you can hear this background noise. My girlfriend, I believe, is running her hairdryer.
Oh, nice. Happens all the time.
My wife looks good for you, JK. Be thankful.
I did not alert her to me being on this on your program here before I went on. My apologies. So if there's background noise, my bad. But yeah, I thought I was taking a step back even further. Brandon Graham, in his player availability, like, what was that, like a week ago, maybe a little more? Yeah. He said he was talking about Jordan Davis being an addition to the defense and how it's crucial that you have, that big body nose tackle in a 3-4. And bad job by us as a reporting group in general that we didn't follow up with him on that. I think it was near the tail end of his press conference. There was only like 2 or 3 more questions thereafter, so nobody followed up on him saying 3-4 defense. But then when Nick came up, you're right. Like I asked him, are you gonna run? Like they're gonna run a lot of different looks. I think you're gonna see like different. You're gonna see odd man fronts. You're gonna see even man fronts. But I think there is gonna be a shift to more odd man fronts this season, and they have the personnel to sort of do it. Like Milton Williams, Fletcher Cox can certainly play that 3-4 defensive end spot. Brandon Graham can shift inside on certain down distance scenarios. You have Jordan Davis, of course, who's a perfect fit, obviously, for a 3-4 nose. Josh Sweat, in my opinion, is a guy that is sort of I think he's more made for like a 3-4 outside linebacker personally than a 4-3 defensive end. And then certainly you have Hassan Reddick, who at 230 pounds or whatever he is not you're not going to line him up at 4-3 defensive end on early downs anyway. So, having an odd man front where he's playing on the edge makes a lot more sense for him. So they have the personnel to sort of fit a 3-4 defense. So just logically speaking, yeah, it's certainly it makes sense for them to shift in that direction a little bit more. But then, as you noted, carving out an entirely new coaching position for essentially like edge rushers is, I think that's a telltale sign that they are going to shift more in that direction.
Well, we know that Hassan Reddick is going to be a weapon. How that weapon will be deployed is yet to be determined. All right, let me throw this one by you. It'll be your answer will be telling. We'll find out tonight the Eagles' schedule. We know they play week 2 at home open against the Vikings, so they're on the road week 1. Let's say they're in Arizona, and after running the ball on first down and picking up 2 yards, Kyler Murray gets 5 wide receivers. Sorry, Zach Ertz, you're off the field. 5 wide receiver look, second play of the season. Who's on the field for the Eagles?
In terms of in their secondary
defense, yes.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, certainly that CB2 spot, the second cornerback spot, which Nick Sirianni thought was funny for some reason. That someone said CB2.
Yeah, I think that was Ed. That was Ed Krause. CB2.
So, yeah, I mean, they have Darius Slay and they have Avonte Maddox. So you have 2 spots that are locked down, your CB1 and your slot corner. And then second cornerback is sort of a mystery what they're going to do there. They brought in, like a half dozen young cornerbacks, both during the offseason and during the actual season last year. I think, and then, of course, we mentioned earlier that they didn't have injuries at the cornerback position last year, which was sort of a departure from what we've sort of come to know.
Steve Nelson was extremely durable, which is sort of underrated, underreported as
and
well.
Slay, both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them. I mean, Slay left a couple games,
yeah,
but he started every game with the exception of the meaningless, week 18 game against the Cowboys. But they had great health there, so we didn't get to see a guy like Zach McPherson play much last year because the opportunity just wasn't there. So we don't know really what those guys can do, because of those guys, the only one that we really even got to see during training camp was McPherson, because they added all those other guys like Tay Gowan, like Carrie Vincent. I guess we got to see Josiah Scott in training camp, but Mac McCain. We didn't get to see most of these guys in training camp. So they're all going to get an opportunity, I think, to show what they can do. In the meantime, you have a guy like James Bradberry, who's suddenly on the market after the Giants cut him. We'll see if they have interest there. There are a lot of other corners, like veteran corners, that you could get by with as a 1-year Band-Aid for, if you get into training camp, you don't like what you see from these younger corners, you're not sure that like they can be there. There are plenty of veteran cornerbacks that can come in and sort of at least hold down the fort, especially in the Jonathan Gannon defense that doesn't put as much stress on cornerbacks as Jim Schwartz's defense did over the last half decade. So I think that they'll eventually be fine there. But as we look at the depth chart as it stands right now, that's certainly a concern area for sure.
Well, one of the things about the scale back in the offseason where we started this, Jimmy, is that, how do you look at Zach McPherson and Tay Gowan and Mac McCain, Carrie Vincent, Mario Goodrich, Josh Jobe, Josh Blackwell, all these undrafted kids. Yeah. How do you look at them in OTAs? You're going to be doing some 7-on-7s, but last year it was Steve Nelson 2 days, I think, before the start of training camp. That's when they signed Steve Nelson. So you can bring in Trey Waynes at that point, probably, history with Jonathan Gannon. But how do you have to bring in Trey Waynes? Do you think the Eagles already have that in mind? We got to upgrade. If Bradbury's market doesn't develop, which it probably will, so the Eagles, I would guess, are not going to be involved. But you never know. When is your timing of, okay, we have to bring in a veteran right now because the Zach McPhersons of the world aren't ready?
Yeah, I think you got to weigh opportunity, first of all. So if you think that like a James Bradberry, for example, is substantially better than the other veteran cornerbacks that are on the market, then maybe you go out and just get that guy. Otherwise, I don't think there's a lot of separation between the other veterans that are sort of available right now. So maybe you can wait into training camp a little bit to see what you have at those, because like you said, they're not going to be able to tell much from what they do in OTAs. Last year was a little different, I think, because they didn't really have anyone who, they've thrown so many guys against the wall, maybe one will stick, but they didn't have that last year. Like they hadn't yet added all those young guys. So maybe that's a little bit of a difference in why they signed Steve Nelson. I didn't realize it was a couple of days before training camp. That's interesting. I thought that was into training camp already, but they did ultimately bring him in July. So yeah, it's a good debate. Like, when you actually bring in that CB2, I would guess that it'll if they don't sign Bradberry now, then I would guess that it will be into training camp. I don't think they'll sign anyone before then, again, unless they think there's a big difference between whoever they want to bring in and the rest of the group.
All right. Another difference between this year's camp and last year's camp. Last year, the Eagles came in believing they didn't want to run much 12 position. And then they got to look at their two tight ends, and the coach said, yeah, maybe we got to run two tight ends more than we were planning because these might be the two best wide receivers that we have receivers we have on the team. They got about 12 tight ends on their 90-man roster right about now. How would you rank them after Dallas Goddard? Who's tight end? Now, sorry, Nick, apologize in advance. Tight end 2, tight end 3, tight end 4. Run them down for us, Jimmy.
Yeah, so Goddard's the one, obviously, and then big drop off from him to whoever's 2. And I think the tight end 2 will sort of be shared by Grant Calcaterra, who they drafted in the 6th round, and by Jack Stoll, who was an undrafted guy last year who got opportunities to play quite a bit, but wasn't really anything more than a blocker. I think he only had like 4 targets or four catches or 4 targets on the season.
And the yardage wasn't great either, Jimmy.
So he wasn't exactly Tony Gonzalez coming off the bench for the Eagles. So I think it'll be sort of it'll be Goddard, and then Calcaterra and Stoll will be tight end 2A and tight end 2B. And then the rest of the group, you have Tyree Jackson there, who tore his ACL in the meaningless Week 18 game last year. I think they're still quite interested in developing him, but you're probably going to have him starting the training camp on the PUP list, possibly into the season on the PUP list. I'm not buying that JJ Arcega-Whiteside's move from wide receiver to tight end.
No, not going to work.
I don't think it has any meaning whatsoever. This guy was basically a tight end last year, and that was sort of his role. He was in there to block. So, like, I don't think that this is going to be sort of a career-saving move for him. And then beyond that, I guess they still have Richard Rodgers on the roster, and who am I missing?
Yeah, Richard's always there. Noah.
Yeah. So, I don't think those guys will make the initial 53. They always sort of seem to have Richard Rodgers. They got a Richard Rodgers button on their phone, like the speed dial. They can bring him back at any time. I don't think.
By the way, is Richard Rodgers 1 on the speed dial, or Jordan Howard 2, or vice versa? Because nobody else calls these guys.
I think it's Rodgers 1 because it's been like 3 or 4 years for him now. Howard 2, and then like police, fire, poison control 3, 4, 5.
And who was that offensive one? Julian Vanderbilt. I thought he had a cot in the back in the little. They just brought him out every couple of days. Julian's here. Julian's gone.
Julian was a willing participant in one of my favorite articles that I've ever done. Basically, what I did was I had a camera and on my phone, I'd written down on a pad every roster transaction that he has ever been involved in. And there was a list of like
a legal notebook, Jimmy?
Yes. There's a list of like 30 of them. And for each, so I read off each roster like I said the date, and I said, what happened? Like he got waived or he got re-signed or whatever. And he had to do a facial expression for each one that I read, and he had a facial expression for every single one, and I took a picture of it, and I just had like a running sort of timeline of his facial expressions after each roster transaction. He was that was the best player interview, the most willing, sort of self-deprecating player interview I've ever had. Julian Vanderbilt is absolutely the man.
And unfortunately, he's not on the roster as of right now. So you're going to have to add another one when they bring him back.
That's right.
But that'll work for you because you say he's a good guy and he'll do it for you. All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of good guys, we've gotten half an hour and we haven't talked about the most important position, which, of course, is quarterback. Jalen Hurts is the guy. Everybody said it. The draft came and went. They didn't pick a quarterback. They did sign a quarterback as an undrafted free agent, though. Actually, they signed 2, and then one guy said, well, wait a minute. You didn't tell me you were going to sign Carson Strong. I'll go down and join Dougie P. and Jacksonville, the Brown kid. Carson Wentz will be in camp. He'll be on the practice squad. That's one you don't have to worry about. I don't think they'll dress him as QB3 because if some team desperately wants him, they could have drafted him. Everybody passed on him. Mm-hmm. At some point, does he get good enough that they elevate him to QB3? At some point, does he really get good enough that if he's better in practice, the Eagles at least have to consider playing him some this year?
Yeah, there's on Reddit. I don't know if you're familiar, but Reddit, there's an Eagles page there. They unearthed a 2022 mock draft from a year ago. So like after the draft last year, they found a mock draft for 2022 that had Carson Strong going number 1 overall. So a very good find by whoever found that. But yeah, he's a talented player. He's got a good arm. He's accurate. Over the last 2 seasons at Nevada, he completed over 70% of his passes, which is like, and they run sort of that, that air raid offense, which, is going to be conducive to high completion percentages. Still, over 70% 2 straight years is very impressive. He's got talent. He was at the Senior Bowl this year. I was impressed with the way he threw the football, but ultimately why he fell, why he didn't get, didn't get drafted at all, is because he's got major knee issues. Knee is basically made of pudding and paper mache. So, we'll see if that can hold up. But he's got talent. I agree with you. He's probably bound for the practice squad this year. I mean, they have Jalen Hurts and they have Gardner Minshew. If he plays really legitimately well.
Don't forget Reed Sinnett, Jimmy.
And Reed Sinnett, my apologies. Reed Sinnett moved from 17 to what, 13, I think? For Nakobe Dean. I don't know how much you care about these jersey analytics. But Carson Strong, if he lights it up in the preseason, you can't waive him because then somebody will just grab him. Somebody will claim him off a waiver. So that's his chance of making the roster. And if he doesn't, then you can stash him on the practice squad and see if he can develop. And if that knee can not disintegrate into dust, then they might have something there. But he is a very talented player. And if his knee holds up, then it is a potential, backup long-term, because you have Gardner Minshew for one more year to be determined if they'll trade him at some point, either this offseason if a quarterback gets hurt or into the season. There's a report that the Panthers had interest during the season last year. The price was too high or whatever. But yeah, certainly if you can bring in a quarterback as talented as him as an undrafted free agent, it's a no-brainer. And
one thing we know, he's going to get playing time in the preseason because Jalen is not. So he's going to get plenty of opportunities to kind of prove himself. He is Jimmy Kempski, PhillyBoys.com, does a tremendous job. Last one from me, Jimmy, is your all NFC East team. The preseason edition is out. Everybody should check that out at PhillyBoys.com. Eagles look pretty good when matched up against the rest of the NFC East. Kind of give people a little preview of the offense and defense.
Yeah, the Giants stink was my biggest takeaway from this exercise, both offensively and defensively. Commanders don't have much offensively other than, Terry McLaurin. But yeah, the Eagles have a better roster than I think they're being given credit for right now. I mean, I had 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen make this, all NFC East team in Mailata, Dickerson, Kelsey, Lane Johnson. So yeah, I mean, their offensive line, like I stated earlier, I think is in the conversation to be the best in the NFL, not just in terms of their starting 5, but they also have good depth as well. And now their receivers and tight end group is a strength all of a sudden. It's all there for Jalen Hurts. It's like the Cowboys have the best quarterback in the division. And I think there's not a huge gap, but there's a decent enough gap between him and whoever you have second. I would have Jalen Hurts second. But he's probably the best, but Dak Prescott is, what would you call him? Borderline top 10 to 12? I
would say borderline top 10, yeah.
Yeah, and, certainly not elite by any stretch, but he is the best in the division. But I think, you take the quarterbacks out of it, I think the Eagles have the best roster in the division. I mean, the Cowboys have some, major playmakers on the defensive side of the ball in Michael Parsons and in Trayvon Diggs. The Eagles don't have, that level of player, in my opinion, on their defense, but they have a lot of good players on defense, and we'll see how that they'll be improved on defense this season, in my opinion. But their offense, the quarterback discussion aside, their offense, that it's a very strong roster right now. I think the only position, quarterback aside, where there are maybe some questions is running back. And they were still the #1 rushing offense in the league last year. Yeah. So, I think it's all there for Jalen Hurts to just grab this job and run with it. And I think that, by the way, this isn't what you asked, but I think the bar for, what Jalen Hurts needs to show in 2022 probably should be elevated a little bit, given the talent that he has working around him, the offensive line, and now these, this premium, however you want to call it, maybe not premium, but a very good group of receivers and tight ends. I think the bar should be raised a bit on the expectations for his play in 2022.
All right, Jimmy, I'm going to wrap it up with having you make a prediction.
Okay.
And no, it's not about the schedule, which is going to be released later today. It won't be about their preseason mark, where Jalen Hurts will not be taking a snap because he's going to be in bubble wrap. No, I want to go even before that. The controlled scrimmages. Last year, undefeated the Eagles.
4-0, baby.
That's right.
The banner is up.
The banner is up at 4-0. They prefer to play AFC teams. I understand why. Last year, Jets, Patriots. I think Baltimore is a given, just to give you my opinion on it. Who do you think they're going to do it against this year? Can they go undefeated again this year?
So it's already been reported that they're playing the Browns. They're going to have joint practices with the Browns. I guess out in Berea.
What town is that out there in Ohio?
Berea, Ohio.
Ohio.
So I'm not thrilled about having. I have family in Cleveland, and no offense to them, it'd be great to maybe drop in and see them for a day or whatever. But I don't want to go to Cleveland for 4 days in the summer. Like, come on, Nick. Yeah. What are you getting me into here? But they'll play the Jets, of course, in one of their preseason games. And spoiler, please don't put this on social media or anything like that. Yeah. But my understanding is they'll play in Miami for their third preseason game.
Okay. All right.
So Miami in August, John. You looking forward to that?
It's not the worst place anytime.
Yeah, Miami's only 1 day in and out. How long are you going to Cleveland for? 4 days?
Yeah.
Well, they have joint practices, so we'll probably be there, I guess, Thursday, Friday. Oh, no. The preseason games are on Thursday, so it'll probably be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll be out there.
I hope they have a tree out there like the Jets. Tree in the middle of the practice.
That's a very nice tree.
Yeah.
Kempski, always a pleasure. Thank you much for coming on. We're going to be asking in just a couple of weeks. Whatever downtime you get, enjoy. But we're expecting you back here on Birds 365.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right.